In the last episode, I talked about buy now, pay later and how it was much older than we all thought it was. And, well, since you're back, this is the last time I'm going to be talking about buy now, pay later. But here is the history of buy now, pay later because it is a lot older than we think it is. And people didn't just use it to finance sneakers or shoes or, the burritos on DoorDash. It was a little bit simpler. And this was over about 170 years ago when it started-ish. So, strap in, let's talk about it. We do have to go way back, and 170 years doesn't do it justice. It's kind of when the first version of it showed up. We need to go back to 1641 because the Pilgrims, before even the United States was a thing, owed money creditors back in London. So the bank set up a way for them to pay in 4 installments. And that is pretty much buy now, pay later, right? And even then, there was no interest, no credit cards, and there weren't even cars yet. And the problem was there was a sewing machine that the Singer Sewing Machine Company made, and they were trying to sell them. But the problem was people didn't make enough money back then to buy a sewing machine. So what did they come up with? $1 down, $1 a week. So that's right. In 1850 is kind of when the first buy now, pay later became a thing. And it worked so well that Singer turned into one of the first giant multinational companies on earth. They were pretty much everywhere. And if you fast forward to around 1920, the installments become even bigger. The car came out, the radio, the refrigerator, all this new technology was coming out and people couldn't afford it. So what happened? Pay it over time in installments. And by 1930, more than 2/3 of all Americans were buying on credit, up to 90% of major appliances. So that means if they needed a fridge, a stove, a microwave, it was all on credit. Buy now, pay later wasn't a slogan. It was just how you bought things back then because people didn't make enough money to justify buying these expensive appliances. And then you got to think about the flip side. During the Great Depression and the money got really tight, stores got nervous and layaway became a thing. And layaway was when you paid in pieces, and once you pay it off in full, you get what you wanted. And that's the exact opposite of buy now, pay later, because buy now, pay later is you get it now, pay later. Instead, it was pay now, get later. And after World War II, the credit card showed up and it took on its own thing that we already talked about. So the idea of buy now, pay later and these other things have been just up and down throughout our entire country's history. And honestly, even before this country, as you were seeing with the Pilgrims. And when was the modern thing born? Well, it was 2008. After the financial crisis, a whole generation watched their economy melt down. We were part of that generation. We watched people get drowned in debt and lose their homes because, well, you couldn't afford the home they got. And secretly, one thing was growing, and it was the credit card. But all at the same time, it was going away. So millennials and Gen Z grew up associating credit cards with the trap that blew up the world, right? Or maybe you think of bad mortgages as the thing that blew up the world. Either way, we know some form of credit or loan ended up causing the 2008 financial crisis. And now things got a lot deeper because of smartphones and online shopping. And both of them take off pretty much the friction that there is purchasing things. So this young generation that we tend to hate credit cards according to all the little charts you see online, but we're buying everything on our phones, and even then we still can't afford it all at once. So there was a couple of startups that decided, why not just give you what you want and not make it feel like a credit card? And that's how Klarna and Affirm and all these companies were born. They wanted to create a credit card that doesn't feel like a credit card, and now they kind of are just credit card providers. And the big players have been around, well, a long time. Klarna was actually founded back in 2005. And then it was a lot difficult because Klarna was older than the iPhone, like smartphones. So it wasn't just pay in full. It was more of a way to get online shoppers to get an invoice and just pay it later. But it was kind of tricky for them. So they had to, tweak a couple things, and well, the buy now, pay later giant that it is today came to be. And then Affirm was actually born in 2012 here in the US. Klarna's Swedish. And one of the co-founders came from PayPal, and PayPal now has their own pay in full formula. And Affirm learned more about bigger purchases and longer payments because at least that way you could find a way to charge some sort of interest, whether it was called interest outright or not. And they built their whole brand being more transparent than a credit card. They're like, oh, here are the fees, no interest, but those fees are the interest. And then one day they just decided to change buy now, pay later like completely. Afterpay out of Australia in 2014, Afterpay really nailed the exact format today, split it into 4 payments, 0 interest, paid off in 6 weeks. And it made it genuinely cool with young shoppers because we thought that's awesome. This is the best way to go, right? And then there was Zip that came out in 2016 and Zezel, and just going on and on about all these different brands. And in 2020, PayPal rolled out its own Pay in 4. So from 2005 from Klarna to today, 21 years later, they have found a way to pretty much nail it. And then even Apple did it a couple of years ago with Apple Pay Later, and then they shut it down because they don't want to deal with being a bank essentially. So when people call this a new trend, you have to keep in mind that Klarna has been around for almost 2 decades figuring out how to make this work. So they've been taking their time to get us. Now, when did buy now pay later truly explode? It was the pandemic. COVID locked us in our homes. We couldn't go to malls or anything. We weren't even working, a lot of us. We got our stimulus checks. So we're just stuck online shopping. And with everyone being so worried about how they're gonna buy things, they decided to just split everything up in 4 payments. And then just like that, buy now, pay later jumps by over 230% and it becomes the giant that it is today. And Wall Street at that time was losing its mind because in January 2021, Affirm goes public. That same year, Klarna valuations rockets to $45.5 billion, making it the most valuable startup in all of Europe. And Europe doesn't really have many startups. A lot of you probably couldn't even name 5. And that's another thing. It was the Europeans who come up with it, not some tech bros in Silicon Valley, which is also just really cool. Square, like the Jack Dorsey company, the Twitter guy, he has Block because he renamed it, right? He also bought Tidal from Jay-Z through this company. And Afterpay was purchased by him for $29 billion. So Block, Square, that company owns now Afterpay. And those founders are very rich now. And that is one of the largest fintech deals in history. And at the moment, buy now, pay later isn't just some scrappy little alternative anymore. It became a new way to shop completely. Just like the old generation had, their credit cards, we have buy now, pay later. Unfortunately, the problem with giving people, buy now, pay later options is some people just won't pay. And in 2022, inflation spiked. Federal Reserve started cracking interest rates up, making it harder for these people to lend money because they need to get money on their own because buy now, pay later's entire business model runs on cheap, easy money. They give you the cash to the store, they wait to collect from you, so when the money suddenly gets expensive, the whole model gets squeezed overnight because these companies are essentially taking humongous loans from these banks at a low interest rate that isn't fixed. So as the interest rate goes up, their interest payments goes up, and now they have a problem because Klarna got hit the hardest. Remember that $45 billion valuation? It collapsed about 85% under $7 billion. Company slashed staff, and the headlines flipped from the future of payments to is this entire bubble about to pop. A lot of people were ready to write off buy now, pay later, but it hasn't gone anywhere. Surprisingly, it's kind of made a comeback. It grew up, and over the next couple of years, these companies cut costs, got serious about actually turning a profit and getting their money back. They clawed their way back out of this hole. Klarna fought its way to profitability and finally went public in September of 2025 last year. Though around $15 billion, which is just a fraction of their old peak. But honestly, the stock has had a rough ride, but it doesn't stop them. And the category on itself is mainstream now. Buy now, pay later is at Walmart. It's used by hundreds of millions of people, and it's moved over $500 billion a year, which is absolutely insane. And the biggest shift of all, the thing that quietly ended the original magic, for most of its history, buy now, pay later was invisible to your credit. It didn't show up, it didn't count. As you guys would know, I was telling you about it in the last episode, but in 2025, FICO and the credit bureau started folding buy now, pay later into your actual credit score. So the rebel alternative was built on specificity to not be a credit card. It is now slowly turning into just another part of the credit system. And even if you go to your, Klarna app, you will see, a credit card option. And it's important to realize that the way they did credit cards was much different. They gave you a credit limit and then make you set the purchase amount for said credit and break it up to payments. So it's really interesting the way they're going with it. I don't know how I feel about it completely. I haven't used it personally in that manner, but the whole story is very, I think, fun because it's so old. because it started with sewing machines, and then people found cars. And whenever there's a new technology, and it tends to be very expensive, right? So people can't afford it, and that's when these services were essentially created. So it's very important to remember that they are very mature companies by this point. 20 years is more than enough time to crack the formula to take your money. So be careful with credit cards, and be careful with using all of these little impulse tricks they have on us because they want you to pay more. Stay safe with buy now, pay later, and please, please, please stay debt free. This is Edgemo, and I'm signing out. Last time I'm talking about any form of buy now, pay later, hopefully.